All right, everybody, welcome back to Horn Takes, episode 33. We're live, streaming to YouTube, we're streaming to Facebook, recording a podcast for our Buzzsprout. Well, really, for everywhere you listen to a podcast. Texas baseball's in full swing. Texas basketball's trying to wrap up the number one spot in the Big 12 regular season. Conte just had a really big town hall with a lot of good information. We'll talk about that. And then the SEC and Big 12 homers are just coming out of the woodwork on the social media ever since my last podcast and some videos I put up on TikTok. We'll get into that a little bit later. So we talked already about Texas baseball and how we just don't know what we should expect for this team. And really, what we should expect from this team is not much. 2/3 of the lineup gone, 2/3 of the pitching rotation gone. We've covered all that. We shouldn't expect a lot. They went to the college baseball showdown, which again they've played in some similar type tournament, multiple times over the last couple of years, last 3 or 4 years. It's basically a bunch of Big 12 teams. Usually the way it plays out is there's two really good Big 12 teams, and then a third Big 12 team. And then kind of the same thing on the SEC side is generally how it ends up working. And honestly, Texas hasn't had a lot of good luck in this tournament, regardless of how good they are or what you should expect from the team. And this time was no different. They went 0-3 in the baseball showdown. Lost a couple of one-run games. Lost to LSU on Friday night, 3-2, I believe. They got beat by Missouri the next day in a little bit higher scoring game, and I think in walk-off fashion. I tried to listen to as much of these games as I could, and I was able to listen to quite a bit of it. But I know they lost that one by 1 run as well. And then Sunday they just got absolutely smoked by Vanderbilt, and they didn't look good. The pitching wasn't good. The fielding was obviously terrible, and we'll get into that in a little bit. So they went 0-3 in the college baseball showdown. I said it before. To me, this doesn't mean much. They could have gone in and won all 3 of these games. They could have gone in and done what they did, which was lose all 3 of these games. And it really shouldn't affect what you think about this Texas baseball team. Perfect example, in 2021, they were 0-3 in this very same tournament format. And it's not really a tournament, it's just a round robin, but they were 0-3. They went on to win 50 games that year and were a couple of plays, a couple of misjudged fly balls away from playing for a College World Series championship. So I don't put a whole lot of stock in these early tournament deals. I think just generally, if you're looking at this Texas team, you just have to think they're probably not going to be as good as they have been the last couple of years. And they've been really, really good the last couple of years. So, I mean, I don't think it's necessarily an indictment of this group of Texas Longhorn baseball players or of David Pierce. They've just had really good teams the last couple of years. They did come home and bounce back against Texas A&M Corpus Christi, 12-2. The bats were better in this game. Jalen Flores went 2 for 4. He's a freshman. He really struggled in this baseball showdown. College baseball showdown. He struggled. Well, and all the bats really struggled. There wasn't a whole lot of offense going on. But Jalen Flores, 2 for 4. He hit his first home run as a Texas Longhorn. Porter Brown went 2 for 3. Jack O'Dowd and Mitchell Daly both were 3 for 4 in this game. And Daly's really struggled, really going all the way back to last year. His freshman year, he had a really good offensive year as a freshman. And then last year just really, really struggled. And he struggled in the college baseball showdown, but he bounced back against A&M Corpus Christi. And then Kennedy had a 3 RBI triple. So you look at the guys, the names we talked about coming into this season as guys that have been with the program a little bit and have some success. Those guys are going to have to step up. They're the leaders of this team. So it's good to see Mitchell Daly have a good night offensively. Good to see Eric Kennedy have a big impact offensively. I think he only had the one hit, but again, it was a 3 RBI triple. So that's what Texas is going to have to do. That's what those guys are going to have to do. And then obviously they're going to have to get some help from some of the younger guys. And I think, Jalen Flores is a freshman. The first baseman is a freshman. Those guys, it's going to take them a while to settle in. So offensively, this team is just going to take some time. It's a work in progress. The defense was better against Texas A&M Corpus Christi. 0 errors versus the 5 they had against Vandy. And then the pitching was better. And granted, Texas A&M Corpus Christi, not a great team. Not nearly as good as the competition they saw there at the College Baseball Showdown with those 3 SEC teams. But what I really liked about this game against Texas A&M Corpus Christi is just they executed better. They just, again, no errors. The bats were making noise. They scored runs. LeBaron Johnson, I really like him. LeBaron Johnson Jr. is a guy that struggled a lot last year. He struggled in this college baseball showdown in limited action. The key for him, I think, and this guy, he's a big kid. I think he's 6'4", 215, 220 pounds, has a really live fastball. We're talking 94, 95, probably up to 96. He has really good wipeout off-speed stuff if he can control his fastball. I think that's the key for him is can he command that fastball. Early in this game against Texas A&M Corpus Christi, he got himself in trouble, left one out over the plate. Guy took him yard in a big way over the green monster there at Dish Falk Field, which is a pretty good poke. That's not an easy shot. And so for him, he's got to be able to control that fastball, get ahead of these guys. And this is like stuff this is advice or the game plan for any pitcher really, but especially him with that fastball and then just the wipeout nature of his off-speed stuff. If he can pitch ahead with the fastball, he's going to give people a lot of trouble. Once he got ahead of hitters in that game against Texas A&M Corpus Christi, they were swinging just to swing because they had to, because they knew if they didn't, they weren't catching up to that fastball, and he was getting a lot of strikeouts with his off-speed stuff. So it looks like LeBaron Johnson is kind of the midweek starter at this point. I think he's got the stuff to be a legit weekend type guy. He's just got to work on that command. Indiana series this weekend. I don't know much about Indiana baseball. I know they're 2-2. They won 1 against Auburn in a 3-game series down there in Alabama. I don't know how good Auburn is. I don't think they're that good. And then they won a midweek game. So we'll see if Texas can win a series this weekend and sort of build some momentum as they move into this season. This team, again, I don't know what to expect from it. Nobody else should expect a whole lot from it. It could be an ugly year. It could be sort of a not great fun year for Texas baseball. We'll just have to see. I think the talent's there. They just got to put it together. Texas basketball, we talked last time about sort of that two-game stretch they had against West Virginia and Texas Tech, how that Texas Tech game was really a missed opportunity to sort of give themselves some cushion. Super winnable game. I think anybody but a Tech fan would say Texas should have won that game. And I don't mean like as the game played out. I just mean as you look at that game, Texas should have gone in there and won that game. They didn't. We've talked ad nauseum about, just the sort of the atmosphere when you go to play in Lubbock. And I think that was a problem for them. But anyway, they dropped that game. They split those 2 games that I thought were very important games for Texas. And now they're tied with Kansas with 3 to go. They did get a bounce back win over Oklahoma at home in overtime. And then they were at home against Iowa State Tuesday night and just absolutely dropped a bomb on them. It's the first time in a long time that the guard play was really, really good. We talked earlier in the season about that guard play, and man, they came out on fire. Short of Arterio Morris, the guards were lighting it up, and then Tyrese Hunter kind of just went on this massively long cold streak. And Jabari Rice, I think he picked up some of that slack, but they just never were the same offensively. The guard play against ISU was really, really good. Tyrese Hunter snapped out of his slump, I guess, and we'll see if it's a true snap this weekend. But Hunter and Rice led the team with 15 points. Carr had 13 points. Morris had 8 points. So there's those 4 guys in the backcourt we've been talking about all season. Tyrese Hunter, I thought it was a great sign. He looked really good. He was confident. He was making shots. Same thing for Arterio Morris. He's been the type of guy that's shown flashes. Morris, and I didn't get to see this game because I don't know. They just didn't. They were originally supposed to broadcast the sort of exhibition game with Arkansas earlier this year, and for whatever reason, really late in the game, they decided they weren't going to do it. Apparently, Arterio Morris absolutely went off in this game, and we haven't seen that from him. And really, this 8-point night he had against Iowa State was the most explosive offensive performance we've seen out of him, at least in a while. Which 8 points isn't a ton, but he looked clean doing what he was doing. So again, really, the guard play I felt like was the big difference against Iowa State. They forced turnovers. They didn't turn the ball over. Now looking at the schedule going forward, they're at Baylor, they're at TCU, and then they're home against KU. We talked about the beginning of this 5-game stretch to sort of finish it up. I felt like for sure, best case, they absolutely had to win at least 3 of them. I think it may be the right answer is 4. So I think this team needs 2 out of the next 3 to wrap up that regular season Big 12 championship. And if they're going to do that, they're going to have consistency with the backcourt. The backcourt's going to have to score. The backcourt's going to have to take care of the ball. The backcourt's going to have to force a lot of turnovers defensively. And I think, and this one's more, it'll help them in these next 3 games, but it's also something that'll help them in the tournament. They got to find a way to get the front court involved more on the offensive end. And the main guy, now Dylan Dessou has had some pretty decent offensive games here lately, but he just doesn't look as fluid, and he just doesn't look like a scorer. Even when he's scoring, it just doesn't. I don't know that it has a great effect on the game. I don't know how to explain it. He's just scoring, but it's not really impacting the game. Now this guy, Christian Bishop, when he gets going offensively, I feel like it impacts the game. This guy is really physical. They don't people don't like defending him. And he's got the type of moves. He doesn't look forced. I think for him, he's just way more athletic than Dylan Dessou. Dylan Dessou just can't do the same types of things that Christian Bishop can do. And I think if they really make an effort to run some of the offensive sets through Christian Bishop, it's going to do 2 things. He's going to get some points, which are going to be impactful. And he's also going to be able to kick that ball back out to some of these scorers on the perimeter. So I really think if Texas can sprinkle a little of that in over the course of these next 3 games, they can get 2 wins out of these next 3. And really, we're looking at split the road games, win your home game, which I think they can do. I know KU's the home game. I know KU's a really good team. Right now, they're projected to be a number 1 seed. Not the number 1 seed, but a number 1 seed. But I don't feel like they're unbeatable for this Texas team. And then obviously we got to minimize turnovers. The games where we've gotten ourselves in trouble, they haven't done a good job taking care of the ball. If they can take care of the ball, it's a really good team. This is a really experienced team. I don't know like how it would stack up against other more, really experienced teams. I feel like I feel like college basketball just generally is not a very experienced game. Like there most of the time these guys that are really good are coming in, they're one and done. So it's really hard in college basketball to keep a group of guys. And now with the transfer portal, I mean, you got guys transferring all over the place for seemingly no reason. Like Tyrese Hunter to me is one of those guys. He was at a successful program. He was having great success at that successful program. And then just leaves. And I'm sure he had good reasons. I'm not saying that, but seemingly, just on the surface, you would go, there was no reason for that guy to leave Iowa State. Anyway, with this team, I just feel like it may be one of the more experienced basketball teams college basketball seen in a while. And it's pretty talented. They have the makeup to be able to make a really deep run into the tournament. But we've also seen this year they can go to sleep at times. And when they do, opposing offenses can make them pay really quick. And you looked at that, we talked about it before, that first KU game. That's what happened. They would go to sleep on the offensive end and have a few turnovers in a row, and bam, you're talking about a 10-point run, 8-point, 10-point run, just in a minute. So if they can stay focused, it's going to be a really tough team to beat. Christel Conte, man. So this was like a big splash hire for Texas. Really, Texas piddled around with a couple of guys after the lost odds, and honestly, they were just jokes of hires. And then Texas goes out and gets Christel Conte, and I think this guy's made some huge changes, across the board, athletics wise. Got the Moody Center built. Some crazy $570 million renovation of Darrell K. Royal suites and end zone seats and this, that, and the other. Christel Conte's done a lot of good stuff at Texas in a very short time, and I'm really excited about what he's going to be able to continue to do as this athletic program moves over into the SEC. But he held this town hall pretty recently. I wasn't able to attend, and I mean virtually attend. But here's some of the stuff he talked about in this town hall meeting. And I like a lot of this stuff, and he talked about a lot more than just this, but these were things that, like, to me, were things I'm excited about. LED lighting and DKR. Unfortunately, lighting is like a big thing, and it seems crazy, but a lot of your atmosphere has to do with being able to turn lights off and turn lights on really quick, and flashlights and all that good stuff. And I believe he's been working on this for a while, and due to some of the issues with COVID and supply chain and all that, I think this was supposed to be done last year heading into this season, but now it's going to be done this summer heading into this 2023 football season. And this is like not only a big impact for that, but a big impact for concessions. And he was talking about, I heard an interview with him where he was talking about just Darrell K. Royal's an old stadium, and there's a lot of old electric stuff in that place. And he was talking about how they couldn't even pop popcorn during game days with the lights on because it would trip breakers and all this. So apparently this LED lighting, maybe the part of this is updating the electric and all that, but it's going to allow them to expand concessions. And I don't know if you've ever been to Darrell K. Royal. It can be pretty light on the concession sometimes, especially up like in the west side upper deck. That's like a mess. trying to get a beer, trying to get something to eat in between quarters or at the halftime, whatever. They announced that they're building a 10,000 square foot recruiting reception area. Not exactly sure what that means. I'm sure other programs have them. I don't know what's going to go in there, but it sounds like a big, big space. Some of y'all might remember on a couple of Texas visits where they had a lot of guys come in. There were some logistical problems, just the logistics of trying to receive that many guys coming in and get them in the right places and get them through whatever activities or schedule that they wanted to get them through. Some of it broke down, and it kind of rubbed some recruits the wrong way. They felt like they were underappreciated, or just, they're kind of like, why am I here type deal. So I think there's been a big push, a big emphasis on how do we handle that better. And I think this 10,000 square foot recruiting reception area is just part of that. There's a new indoor practice facility coming. If you're familiar with the bubble down in Austin, it's like 5,000 miles from the stadium. It's on the complete opposite side of the stadium from where all the dressing rooms and locker rooms and lifting facilities, all that type of stuff is. It's outdated. It's been there since the Mac Brown era. But that's where Texas football, they would get on buses during, I don't know how Mac Brown handled it. During the Tom Herman era, they would get on buses and ride over there. That's how far it is from their facilities. And it just caused, it's just a time deal. You're wasting time, right? Trying to get people on buses, get them over there. So there's going to be a new indoor practice facility coming that's right on the south side of Darrell K. Royal. And that's where all the offices are for the coaches. That's where the locker rooms, weight rooms, all this stuff is on the south side of Darrell K. Royal. And the cool thing about what this practice facility is going to be able to do is it's going to allow Texas to go back to natural grass, which is something that a lot of like old school football fans say football should be played on grass. I don't have a huge problem with turf. My biggest concern with turf is just the injuries. If you go look at it, non-contact injuries to the lower limbs, when you're on turf, there's a huge increase in the chance that's going to happen. And Texas lost Troy O'Meary, who was a really good wide receiver recruit, twice in preseason, in fall camp to torn ACLs. I know one of them for a fact was a non-contact. And then last year, Junior Angelo and Isaiah Nair, who's the big transfer out of Wyoming at wide receiver, they both went down with ACLs in non-contact drills. So I think not only from an aesthetics and you're just supposed to play on grass, but from a safety perspective, that's a big deal, getting Darrell K. Royal back to grass. So that's coming. If there's one thing that comes up every single year amongst Texas fans, it's why do we not have an alternate uniform? And I think generally the alternate uniform discussion runs down, you're either an old school guy, you've been a Texas fan forever, and I mean, you could be anywhere from my age up to 80, 85 years old, and you just say, man, why would you mess with it? It's one of the most iconic uniforms, one of the most recognizable uniforms. It's simple, yet really nice, really clean. And then you've got this younger generation that they all want everybody to be the Oregon Ducks and have 15,000 uniforms. So there's always a debate every offseason. And one of the big ones is always black. I don't know why people want a black alternate uniform. My take on alternate uniforms is who gives a shit? It's a freaking uniform. Like, if you're going to go to a school because they have alternate uniforms, you're probably a dumbass. And that's just my opinion. I don't know if it's right. I don't think, I don't think a player that you want to have in your program is going to make a decision about where to go to school and where they want to play football based off of whether that school has an alternate uniform or not. Maybe I'm naive. That's my position. And that's also Chris Del Conte's position. He made it 100% clear that the colors at the University of Texas are orange and white, and that's what our uniforms are going to be. Not a huge talking point, but worth addressing given the debate that rages on amongst Texas fans. He talked a little bit about the Longhorn Network, what's going to happen with the Longhorn Network. And really, I think it's going to fold right into the SEC network. So one of the huge concerns for me, and I think a lot of Texas fans when this whole SEC announcement came out, is I think most of us figured Longhorn Network is going to have to go away. There's already an SEC network. I don't think the SEC is going to make an exception for Texas to have their own network, nor should they, to be perfectly honest. But I think we all felt that was going to happen. And for me, what I really enjoy is I can watch any Texas basketball game, any Texas baseball game that's a home game. I can, and it's not, like a big deal. I can watch it, meaning it's not on ESPN or ABC or something like that. You watch it on the Longhorn Network. And so for me, I'm thinking, and I love watching baseball, obviously. I was concerned that I wasn't going to get that. But it sounds like all that's going to fold right into the SEC network, specifically SEC Plus. So if you're ESPN Plus, I believe you get SEC Plus. So Texas fans will still have access, and probably better access to those types of things, because not everybody can get Longhorn Network. One of the other things he talked about was the Red River Shootout and wanting to push the game time for that to 2:30. And this is another one of those deals that the debate rages on amongst Texas fans. You've got Texas fans that say, why is this not a night game? And to be perfectly honest, I think, and I don't know, but I feel like the reason this will never be a night game is because of the area of Dallas that it's in. And I'm not speaking for myself. I've never felt unsafe around Fair Park. Now, granted, I've never been around Fair Park at night, and I go to Fair Park and I get in and out to go to this game. And that's the only time I'm ever at Fair Park. So I don't know how dangerous that area of Dallas is, but the sentiment is that it's dangerous, especially after dark. And since the parking around the fair and the Cotton Bowl is just so shitty, and it's not their fault. I mean, unless you build a skyscraper that's a parking garage, there's just not going to be good parking. You're having a park generally in people's yards and in neighborhoods and things like that. And so it's just always been a deal. Like, it's not going to ever be a night game, but generally it's an 11 o'clock kick, and that's a rough get to the stadium, walk around the fair. And it's not rough. It's just pressed for time. So he wants to make the Red River Shootout a 2:30 kick permanently. And I don't know how much the networks have to do with that. I would assume some. I think that's probably something that, the SEC and ESPN will figure out a way to make happen. I would be excited about it. I think, again, 11 a.m., unless you stay downtown, getting into the fairgrounds is just a nightmare. What we did last year, we actually stayed at a hotel downtown and got on a train that dropped us off right outside the gates of the fairgrounds. And that was pretty awesome. And then we just got back on the train and it dropped us off right next to our hotel. So I think, but not everybody can do that. There's only so many hotels downtown, and the train system in Dallas is only, what it is. Doesn't cover all of the DFW Metroplex, although it covers quite a bit on the east side of, the east side of the Metroplex. But if you're driving to get into the Fair Park, it is a mess, especially at 11 o'clock, for an 11 o'clock kick, because you got 85, 90,000 people that are coming just for the game. And then you got another, I don't know how many that are just going to the fair on that Saturday. So I think that's a good time, 2:30. That'll keep you out of the don't be there at dark, but it'll also let you sleep in. You don't have to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning, get ready to get to the fairgrounds. One of the other things, and this is just, he didn't talk about this is just my general thoughts. I think Cristel Conte's done an awesome job as the AD so far. One of the big things he's done, so I used to be a season ticket holder back in the mid to late 2000s. So like 2004, 2005, somewhere in that range to say 2010. Back then, there was tons of like state parking lots that you could, that they would open up for tailgating. So there was all this area that was available outside of the stadium area for tailgating and stuff like that. But the problem with that was a lot of those areas were really far from the stadium. We're talking, not really far, but like say, a 15, 20-minute walk to get to the stadium. And around the stadium, there wasn't very much space for tailgating because there's just not a lot of space on the UT campus, period. There were a couple of lots that were close that there was quite a bit of tailgating, but generally speaking, most of the tailgating was sort of 10, 15, 20 minutes away from the stadium. And close to the stadium was a lot of parking for very wealthy donors. They could, like, some of these guys could just pull up, park literally right outside the stadium, walk into the stadium. So what that caused is, you'd be out tailgating and, having a good time. And then all of a sudden, if you didn't start walking about an hour before kick, by the time you got over to the stadium, got into the gate, depending on where you sit, we've always been West Side upper deckers. Well, we did have some seats. We did have some seats in the north end zone when they finished that, and like in the kind of the club, and that wasn't the club, but it was like a chairback section they had. But even that was not easy to get to. Like, it takes what I'm getting at is it takes a long time to get to the stadium, get into the stadium, and find your seat, get to where you want to sit. So, but if you didn't leave an hour early, a lot of people weren't showing up to the games by the time the game kicked. And I think that was like that was kind of an embarrassing thing. Depending on who you were playing, people just didn't make a huge effort to get in there. So let's fast forward to now. There's been multiple reasons for this, but a lot of those state lots you can't park in anymore. In fact, almost all of them you can't park in and tailgate anymore. Some of them don't even exist anymore due to all the construction that's gone on in that area of Austin. So what's Cristel Conte do? He says, how do I provide something? And there was nothing around the stadium back then. When DeLoss Dodge was there was nothing. It was a stadium and then some streets. So Cristel Conte says, we got to get all these fans close to the stadium, and we got to get people's asses in the seats before kickoff. Like, ideally, when the band and all that's going through their pregame stuff, we want Texas fans in the seats. So he comes up with Bevo Boulevard. And man, it's such a simple concept, but it was absolutely genius. And every time we go now to those home games, we go early so we can go just check out Bevo Boulevard. And I remember, the Bama game last year, it was just electric pre-game on Bevo Boulevard. And all Bevo Boulevard is just a ton of vendors. There's tons of beer, tons of food trucks. There's mixed drink stands, craft beer. There's like a trailer that's got a ton of taps that's just all craft beer. There's carnival rides, zip line crap, TVs, like these big blow up projection screen things where they're showing games. What else? Carnival type concessions and things as well. You can buy merchandise. Bevo comes and walks. The players come in right there at Bevo. It's just a really cool atmosphere and a good way to get right there by the stadium and keep you right there by the stadium. So there's almost not any need to tailgate anymore if you go to a Texas game. You can just go right up to the stadium and take part in all these cool activities and drink till you can't drink no more. And again, tons of really good food. Fox Sports had their setup like really close to Bevo Boulevard for the Alabama game last year. If you go down the end of the Midway, what they call it, I forgot what it's called, Midway, something Midway where all the carnival stuff is. At the end of that, over at LBJ Library, that's where game day will set up. And they also have Longhorn City Limits, which is another cool thing. They have all these concerts, and these are sometimes they're before the game. If it's like a night game, they'll do obviously Longhorn City Limits before the game. If it's game, they'll do all that stuff after the game, and it's pretty big names. It's not like current big names, but Third Eye Blind's been there, Flo Rida's been there. I'm sure there's some other big names. We don't get to go to every game, so I don't always know who's playing. But point being, he's really turned a football game into like an all-day event that everybody can come enjoy. You can bring the kids and they can have a blast, and I think that's been huge because now you go into the stadium and when it's time for the kick, everybody's there in the stadium. So kudos to Christel Conte. He's a smart guy, and I think he's really embraced the challenge of being the athletic director at the University of Texas. He's come up with a lot of cool stuff. And I'd be interested to hear, any of you Bama fans were at this game. What were your thoughts, and what's comparable in the SEC? I know you got the Grove, and I know SEC tailgating is like this big thing, and unfortunately I haven't had a chance to check any of that stuff out yet. I will. So let us know what you thought of that. Anybody that is listening, and this will go on. Some of this will go on TikTok probably. So I'll make a clip of this and put it up as well. But I'm curious what people's thoughts are of the pregame, postgame activities and whatnot around Darrell K. Royal. I think it's great. All right, we talked about, obviously the news came out a couple weeks ago about the move to the SEC for Oklahoma and Texas is it's a done deal, 2024. So I've been talking about schedules and what that might look like, and God Almighty, the SEC and the Big 12 homers have just come out of the woodwork. And I'll start with you SEC homers. Every time I talk about Texas going to the SEC, it's Texas is going to get killed. Welcome to the big time. Welcome to the league. And all other assorted bullshit along those lines. Listen, Texas, the SEC is good football. Nobody's going to deny that. There's tough teams in the SEC, but the SEC really, the biggest difference between the SEC and other conferences is not the body from top to bottom. It's that the top teams in the SEC, which again, most of the teams in the SEC are not, are better than the top teams in other conferences. But you get past those, probably like the third best team in the SEC, third, fourth best team. It's the same as any other league. And I know that's going to piss all you SEC folks off, and that's fine. I don't care. It's the truth. And it doesn't matter who you are. If you're playing Georgia, you're playing Alabama, you're going to have a rough time. Never mind the fact that historically Texas is really good against the SEC. They have about a 65% winning percentage against the SEC all time. Look at their last 4 games against the SEC. The record's not good, 1-3. But I think if you look at who they played, they had a close loss to the national champion LSU team, who a lot of people say could be considered one of the best teams of all time. Certainly one of the best offensive teams we've ever seen was that LSU team. Texas Texas had a 7-point game with them. Texas had a 1-point game last year with a very good Alabama team. Now, I know their season didn't turn out the way they wanted it to. And I don't think it turned out the way they were capable of having a season. I mean, I think Alabama roster-wise certainly is one of those teams that could compete, for the national championship. They just had some struggles last year. They had some key positions where they had struggles. Obviously, Arkansas in year one for Steve Sarkisian was the black eye game. And I give Arkansas all credit, man. They beat the shit out of Texas. But if you're looking at it objectively, Steve Sarkisian's first year, if there's ever a team that's primed to get their ass smashed, it's a team with a first-year head coach. Doesn't mean it always happens. But Texas's program was struggling for so long, even under Mack Brown. I mean, Texas really struggled the last few years in the Mack Brown era. They struggled really badly through the entirety of the Charlie Strong era. They had their struggles. I think Herman was obviously a notch above Charlie Strong, but they still had their struggles there. And the recruiting, although the classes were really good from a ranking perspective, the recruiting didn't have a lot of rhyme or reason. The roster was a mess when Steve Sarkisian took it over, especially on the offensive and defensive lines. And so, yeah, they went into a place that's really hard to play against the team that really hates Texas. And they got their asses kicked by Arkansas. Give it to Arkansas. But then they had a win over a really good Georgia team. Kirby Smart, really good coach. So, point being, historically, Texas has been good against the SEC. Their last 4 games, and the only reason I chose 4 is because it's the most recent. Now, obviously, I think you got to go back pretty far from those 4 to have a matchup with an SEC team. But they didn't fare badly in those games, and they played 3. If you look at the dominating teams in the SEC over that time period, those are the 3 teams. They won one of them. They played toe-to-toe with the other 2. One of those other 2 won a national championship that year. This whole Texas is going to get killed thing, it's just dumb. This is bullshit. So, all you SEC homers that think Texas is going to get killed, and I'm not saying they're going to go in there and take over the SEC. I don't think that's even remotely close to what's going to happen. But I think they're going to do better than a lot of people think they're going to do. And I think Steve Sarkisian has now got a very good foundation, especially in those 2 key areas that I just talked about, offensive line and defensive line. He knew when he got to Texas that Texas wasn't where it needed to be to join the SEC in those 2 spots. And he and his staff have focused so heavily on those 2 areas that they basically flipped what it used to be like. It used to be under Tom Herman, they had tons of 4 and 5 stars, but they're all skill guys. None of that on the offensive line. None of that on the defensive line. Now, after the last 2 classes, and those are Steve Sarkisian's real 2 classes at Texas, he got hired way too late to make an impact on his first technical class. But these last 2 Steve Sarkisian-led classes are full of really good offensive linemen, full of really good defensive linemen. And that, I've been saying this for years. You look at You look at the SEC and why those teams that are dominant in that conference are dominant in that conference, and it's because they are dominant in the trenches. So I think he's got the groundwork for that. I think this 2024 class is going to be pivotal. There's some big defensive lineman names that if he can manage to get into the fold, there's some pretty good offensive lineman names out there as well. If he can build another layer on top of what he's already got there, I think Texas is primed to be able to go and fare well in that league. And again, not saying they're going to win the SEC championship all the time, not saying they're going to play for the SEC championship all the time. There's going to be 2 teams that play for the SEC championship in any given year, and there's going to be 14 teams that don't, and there's going to be some good teams that don't. So I think SEC folks, I think the country is going to be surprised by what Texas actually brings to that conference. And I know Texas has been down. I know Texas has been down for a while. You can really start to see the program evolving past that. And again, I think this year for Texas is really big. This season is going to be kind of like a gate for them. If they can have a successful final Big 12 season, to me, that means winning 9-10 games, winning the conference. They're going to be able to keep that momentum recruiting wise. And they're going to have the type of roster that can come in and be competitive in that league. On the other side of the coin, you got Big 12 fans, the holdovers, the ones that'll be in the Big 12 after 2024, running their mouths about how Texas killed the Big 12. And this is like the biggest load of bullshit that gets perpetuated amongst college football fans and these other Big 12 schools. Excuse me. Texas did not kill the Big 12. And here are the 2 things you hear most often about, how Texas killed the Big 12, the Longhorn Network. You didn't see it, but I just rolled my fucking eyes under my sunglasses. Texas wanted the Longhorn Network, and that's killed ripped the Big 12 apart. Texas wanted a Big 12 network. Texas went to the Big 12 and said, let's put a network together. Let's be the first conference to put a network together. And the Big 12 told them to go fuck off. Okay, so the Lost Odds went and put together the Longhorn Network. And it hasn't been wildly successful. It's probably been a net loss for ESPN. Most of that, I feel like, is because at that point was sort of that point in Texas's football past where they started kind of coming down. They were doing really well in the mid to late 2000s under Mac Brown. And then right when the Longhorn Network came along, the football program wasn't as successful. I don't think it had anything to do with the Longhorn Network. But a network that covers one team is only going to be as successful as those teams are, right? So again, Texas didn't go do the Longhorn Network unilaterally and tell the rest of the Big 12 to go fuck themselves. Texas tried to lead the conference in that direction, and they didn't want to go. And then the other thing you hear is Texas wanted too much power. And I think this probably applies to OU as well. Guess what? Texas and Oklahoma bring in 50% of the revenue that the Big 12 receives every year. So, of course, they want to be treated differently than the other teams in the Big 12 when it comes to revenue and revenue sharing. And if it was Texas Tech, Baylor, or whoever else, that brought in 50% of the revenue for the entire conference, they would be the exact same way. And you can't tell me any otherwise. Because if you try to tell me that, you're full of shit. The reality, this whole bickering between all these other schools in Texas and Oklahoma comes down to money and the fact that historically, Texas and Oklahoma have been kicking everybody's ass in the Big 12 since the Big 12 became the Big 12. Nebraska, Colorado, A&M all left the conference. People will say, well, Texas ran them off. Well, they might have, but it's because none of those teams could beat them. They couldn't beat Oklahoma. They couldn't beat Texas. They got tired of being in a league where they knew they had no chance to win. So they went to other leagues where they had no chance to win. At least A&M, this is probably the smartest thing A&M's ever done. They weaseled themselves into the SEC under the cover of darkness while Texas was trying to cut a deal with the Pac to bring A&M and Texas and possibly Texas Tech over to the Pac. And out of left field, A&M says, no, we're going to the SEC. That was a huge break for them. I said it back then. A lot of Texas fans were like, oh, that's stupid. They're going to get killed. Da, 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 da. But you know what it did do? It gave A&M a lot of really good edge in recruiting. They could hold that SEC shit over Texas's head for a long time, and it made a difference. These Big 12 teams that are holdovers that are going to be the future Big 12 teams, now that Texas and Oklahoma are leaving, they're going to make and this is with a new deal. They're going to make $5 million less a year each than they were making when Texas and OU were in the league. So, of course, they're pissed. Of course, their fans are pissed. Good riddance, right? I keep seeing good riddance. Good riddance. We finally get to get rid of Texas and Oklahoma. You don't really want to get rid of Texas and Oklahoma. You're just tired of them beating you all the time. Again, historically. You're tired of never truly having a chance to win that conference. Again, historically. And you're pissed off because nobody really wants to watch your team play outside of your fan base. And that leaves you with no choices. That leaves you with no leverage in any kind of negotiation when you start talking about money. I don't know what's going to happen with the Big 12. I think they brought in some good teams. I think, and I've talked about this before, the previous Big 12 administration was on absolute cruise control. They didn't give a shit. We'll see how this new bunch does. So I don't know what's going to happen to the Big 12. The Big 12 may go on and prosper. Or it could fall apart and get rolled up into something else. I don't know. But all you Big 12 holdovers that are pissed at Texas and OU for going and finding something better and not having to listen to y'all bitch all the time about stuff, don't be mad. Just be like the SEC homers and say we're going to get our asses kicked. Brandon Miller's situation. I don't usually talk about other teams. Most of my content is focused on Texas, but this is kind of a weird deal. So for those of you that don't know, and I don't know how if you follow sports, you wouldn't know, this whole Alabama murder thing just took a really weird turn here recently. So like a little backstory, a month and a half ago or so, some altercation happens at a nightclub or an area where there was a nightclub. And Darius Miles, who was a Alabama basketball player, shot and killed like a 23-year-old woman in basically like a shootout. I feel like whatever confrontation Darius Miles had was with her boyfriend. I don't know what they got into it about, maybe her. And somehow they got in a little shootout and the woman is dead. But the interesting thing, and the thing we didn't know until pretty recently, was that Brandon Miller, who's like this all-world freshman basketball player for Alabama, was a lot more involved in that deal than anybody knew, except for the coaches at Alabama and the University of Alabama and the police, obviously. How this goes down is Brandon Miller drops off Darius Miles at this area and says, I'm not going to go to the club. I'm just going to go eat dinner or whatever. So he goes to eat dinner. He starts getting text messages, about come pick me up from Darius Miles. And then one of the last messages says, bring me my gun. Now, Brandon Miller's lawyer already released a statement that says, oh, he was already going to pick him up, end of the night type of deal, when he got that text, which that may be true. But if someone texts you, bring me my gun, and they're at a nightclub, what do you think that means? What would any reasonable person think that meant? Because here's the problem. This guy's been playing basketball for weeks now, and the police have not reported about it. The school has not reported about it. This guy is at least loosely an accessory to a murder. And the basketball coach is saying, oh, he was just at the wrong place at the wrong time. No, he got a text that said, bring me my gun. And again, I know if one of my friends texted me under that context, I know he's at the club. He knows I know that he's at the club, and text me, bring me my gun. There ain't no fucking way I'm bringing him a gun. So I think what's interesting, and as I was reading about this, I was trying to find something that talked about the timeline. Like, so did he, and here's the other thing his lawyer said, and this may be 100% true. I have no idea. He never actually touched the gun. So it's not like Brandon Miller, drove up to this place, parked, brought a gun, put it in his pocket, and brought it to this guy and handed him the gun, said, here's your gun. Apparently, this gun was in the back of Brandon Miller's car, possibly hidden, possibly, Brandon Miller claims and his lawyer claims he didn't even know it was in there. And the only reason that he, quote unquote, brought him the gun is because he was already coming up there to pick him up. But so when I first started reading about this and hearing about this, I'm like, well, what's the timeline? Did he show up, the guy grabs his gun, and then he drives off, and then this stuff happens? Or was this like fairly immediately, once he arrived, did this shootout occur? And I think the answer is it was fairly immediate. Like, he pulled up, Darius Miles gets in the back of the car, gets his gun, and then commences to have a shootout with this other dude. I think is what happened. And then the other thing, and if that's the case, he was there when it happened. So did he turn himself in? Or did he reach out to the police at all? What did that look like? I mean, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a police officer. I'm not a judge. I think it's probably illegal to just take off from the scene of a murder or a shootout. I don't know, but I feel like it's probably not on the up and up. The other key here was the detective's report said that Brandon Miller blocked this young woman and her significant other, maybe the man she was with, blocked their car from being able to escape. That's what the detective says. His lawyer says that's not true. That didn't happen. So this whole situation, to me, I'm a big proponent of, innocent until proven guilty. Let's not derail people's lives simply because someone accused them of something, or they're even on trial for something. Like, that's not an excuse to tear down someone's livelihood. And I'm a big proponent of make sure you know all the facts before you go that route, right? But man, this one just stinks to high heavens to me, and I don't know how the basketball coach allows this kid, and I don't know how the University of Alabama allows this kid to be in classes, go on basketball trips, participate in basketball, like be around their student body at all. It's like a safety issue, is it not? Maybe I'm overthinking it. Let me know what you guys think. I think it's I think some more stuff's going to come out about this, and it could get bad for the coach there at Alabama, and it could get bad for Brandon Miller, and it could get bad for the University of Alabama. You guys subscribe to the podcast, subscribe to the YouTube channel. All these streams go up on the YouTube channel. Click that bell and get some notifications. I do a lot of shorts. Put all my podcasts up there. You can find me on TikTok, Twitter, and Facebook at Horn Takes. You can email me at horntakespodcast@gmail.com with all your questions, comments, concerns, and criticisms. I love them all. Hook them.